Oh boy.
Okay, I'm on.
Yat A. Hasilo Corolla A. D. Calnez. And today you are listening to Politics on the Navajo Nation podcast. Ako Shane Kicheda hun sito le kachi in Shino to Sani Bashino na Kaiden Ada Shichedo, but Nada Shina, let's say, sounds the Hodia article. So we've been doing these podcasts, and today we have a guest. His name is Rodriguez Morris, and he is the former director of the Navajo Nation Office of Ethics and Rules. Just to kind of give you some background information for all you listeners. Thanks for joining us, by the way. I know that this has been a very popular segment that people have been looking forward to, and I'm looking forward to engaging with Mr. Morris. And the background is this. I interviewed the three people from Office of Ethics and Rules, and that was Felicia Williams, Albert Benali, and Robert Jumbo. And honestly, I think everybody came away very, very disappointed. We didn't learn any more about what the functions of Office of Ethics and Rules was all about. And so now connecting the dots of what currently is and what it should be and what it was or what the dysfunctions are. Obviously, the Navajo people, we're not stupid. We know exactly what is going on with our government. There are situations that are not exactly in balance. There's dysfunctions. And so we're going to explore that this evening. So, Mr. Morris, could you please introduce yourself and let the audience know a little bit about who you are and where you're at and all that fun stuff? Mr. Morris.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Nez, thank you for having me on this evening and inviting me on to your podcast. If anything, my name is Rodriguez Morris, but on the Shlon, Twapa Shishin, Nash Ezutachi, Ada Shiche, Nekia Ani, Eta Chanel. I come from the community of Coyote Canyon, Maite, Klijadat, Nasha. That's where my parents have their home. My mother, my siblings, we all come from that specific areas. But and if anything, I'm currently in private practice, the Morse Law Office. We're a general practice, and we've been in practice since February. So prior to that, I actually had my law office, and I actually did practice on the Navajo Nation within several tribal courts as well. Um, and if anything, I was the prior director for ethics and rules prior to me going back into private practice. Prior to that, I've been practicing law in numerous capacities for the past 20 years for numerous tribes, for the U.S. Army as well as within the state of New Mexico. And I've appeared in courts all across this country doing numerous types of cases. But and then prior to my leaving Navajo Nation, before I actually was the presenting officer with Ethics and Rules, wherein I did serve as a Ethics and Rules presenting officer for 4 years. So I'm well versed with regards to the laws that Ethics and Rules Office is supposed to be enforcing. And I actually had a hand in certain things that were done within that office, to include some of the one of the amendments that occurred within that office for the statutes of limitation. But if anything, I've also worked with DOJ prior to going back with ethics and rules, and I'll be getting a little bit more into that as far as how that played a big part in my termination from the Ethics and Rules Office. But that's who I am, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me on tonight.
You bet. Thank you. Yeah, Lana Otto. Welcome, everybody, for joining us this evening. Again, I want to just preface this as being an interview pertaining to the Office of Ethics and Rules, and we're going to be based. This is not an interrogation of Mr. Rodriguez Morris. This is a analysis of what what he observed and some of what happened and what some of the possibilities of the dysfunction is. So, thank you for joining us. Like I said, when I originally invited the three folks, they agreed. I'm talking about from ethics and rules, the people who are now there. And again, like I said, we didn't get anything. And so I want to just establish the foundation from your perspective, what you think is the function and the reason why that the Office of Ethics and Rule was established, the history and the amendments, and also the separation of the government or the actual office into two different offices. Mr. Morris.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to give a brief background with regards to the Ethics and Rules Office, the Ethics and Rules Office is actually established by law under code, under subsection or Title II, subsection 3786, wherein the Ethics and Rules Office is established as a part of the Navajo Nation government. And at this current time, the Ethics and Rules Office falls under the legislative branch, which is under the basically under the Speaker's office, but primarily, the Ethics and Rules Office is established by code, and its primary purpose is to represent the interests of the Navajo Nation in maintaining the highest standards of ethical conduct for elected officials, appointed officials, basically government officials, and to make available information, the laws, rules, regulations, rulings, any prohibitions, and to provide education to the Navajo Nation. And their primary goal by law basically states that they're supposed to protect the interests of the Navajo Nation in fair, honest, and efficient conduct as far as the Navajo Nation government goes. The actual personnel is also defined within that office by law under subsection 3788, wherein it does establish for a position for a director with the Ethics and Rules Office and administrative and secretarial staff as far as what the Navajo Nation allows within the actual budgets itself. The Ethics and Rules Office, the executive director for the Office of Legislative Services, is the one that hires for the director position. And right now, I believe that's I forget the guy's and then the guy's name, but it's their director for Office of Legislative Services. He's the one that oversees that. Prior to him being placed in that office, it was Jalissa Johnson who maintained that office. And way back when I was first with that office, that was maintained by Tom Platero. So the Office of Legislative Services is the administrative supervisor for the Ethics and Rules Office. But again, that falls directly under the legislative branch. The Office of Legislative Services director reports directly to the chief of staff for the speaker and the actual speaker itself. And in this situation, so that's how it's basically set. You have an actual director who's supposed to manage and oversee that office. In addition to the laws itself, when you look at the personnel and organization, the duties and responsibilities are also found within the law as well. 3789, duties, responsibilities, and the authority from your executive director. And then under the general direction of the Ethics and Rules Office, the actual staffing itself. And what it states within the law itself, it actually states and one thing I want to point out as well, when you're looking at the codes, these codes can be found at the Ethics and Rules website. If you go to the website, you can download their plan of operation, the current laws. And when you look at those laws, when you're reading through those laws, you're going to see that the Ethics and Rules Committee is still it is still referred to within the Navajo Nation ethics law. That demonstrates to you that the ethics and rules law or just the neglect to that office. Their laws have not been upgraded since the council reduced down to 24 delegates. So when you're looking at an office, when you're looking at the laws, you will see that there is mention of the Ethics and Rules Committee. Now understand that any cases that get filed with ethics and rules, goes over to the Office of Hearings and Appeals. And that was what the council had actually set in place when they went from a council of 88 members down to 24. So right now, any cases that actually get that are being adjudicated go over to the Office of Hearings and Appeals. It's no longer the Ethics Committee. To my understanding, the actual ethics committee was way before my time, but they were members of the actual Navajo Council that actually used to sit as a quasi judicial hearing body. They would be the ones who actually hear cases and violations of any government officials, to include their own council members. Currently, that's all being handled by the Office of Hearings and Appeals. And when you go through the actual laws itself, it'll give you the actual duties and responsibility as far as how that office is set. In addition to that, there is the plan of operation. This plan of operation was passed by the Law and Order Committee by resolution. And the actual, you will find this on the website as well. And it lays out exactly, again, it goes to the establishment of the Ethics and Rules Office. And it goes into what the office is set for. And its primary purpose is to protect the interests of the Navajo Nation, the Navajo people, to ensure that you have a government, you have government officials that will actually operate fairly, honestly, efficiently. And right now, when you look at our government, that's just not where it's at. In my own personal opinion, I think this is one of the, just from assessing the actual government now, we're really um, in a bad time right now. I've worked, as I stated before, I've worked for other tribes, and I've seen how other governments operate. I see how governments trump people's civil rights. The Navajo Nation is actually pretty much operating in a really dysfunctional way right now. And I actually addressed this to the Nabi meeting back in December as well, and I informed them that I've never seen this government as volatile as it is right now. And I think a lot of it has to go to just the times now. People go onto social media, they put their disdain, they share misinformation there, and what have you. And you have government officials who are doing that. And I think they actually take the lead of government officials in the federal government. You see President Trump doing that. You see Congress members doing that, slamming each other, putting false information out there. And of course, Navajos are going to do the same thing. They do that to one another. They put a lot of information out like that. But if anything, the actual director, how they go about actually hiring for the director is the Office of Legislative Services is the one that would announce the actual vacancy. Then they're the ones that would go through the Department of Personnel Management. So they announce, goes through the Department of Personnel Management. They take in applicants, and whatever applicants that they receive, they refer back over to the Legislative Services Director. And then that person is the one who hires for that specific position. But bear in mind, the Ethics and Rules Office has been trying to fill that position for over 4 years. You've never had counsel addressing those issues, never trying to help that office try to fill that position. The former director, Mr. Lunel Harrison, to my knowledge, was actually trying to fill that position. But you got people that don't want to work in that position just due to the politics and the great responsibility that it has. So that office has been severely understaffed by not having a director. They also don't have a presenting officer. Understand that your director and your presenting officer have to be barred to practice law in the Navajo Nation. These are your legal officers that sit in that office that's supposed to help the investigators and the administrative and secretarial staff there. But they haven't had that this whole time. And from the time I was in that office for exactly 76 days, but since that time, they've had a interim director who's an investigator. This person does not have a bar license. This person cannot make legal analysis or the determinations of actual cases. So I really question. I was listening in on their presentation, and she was claiming that there was over 176 cases that they had on the books, but now they're down to 146. And I'm like, okay, well, that's about 30 cases. And I question as to how they looked at those cases, how those cases were handled, and how they were closed out by investigators. You did not have legal counsel on staff, to my knowledge. And I understand they have a contract attorney that works out of Flagstaff, but this individual does the bare minimum. And when you look at the budget for that contract attorney, it's around $10,000. When you take on any type of individual case within the Navajo Nation, on average, you're going to spend anywhere from $2,500 up to, I'd say about 5,000. That's on the low end. So you think about that, $10,000, you could probably get two really good cases out of that attorney if you were going to run that case by just your normal billing process. So the Ethics and Rules Office has really been understaffed. They don't have a presenting officer. But I'll tell you, within that 76 days that I was there, I managed to hire a presenting officer, someone who was barred, ready to go. That was myself. I was ready to actually go. In fact, from day one, November 17th, 2025, I jumped right into cases and was starting to move on cases, looking at the actual dockets, looking at individual cases, making determinations. And then the beginning of December is when we got the presenting officer. She also started filing cases. She started handling what she needed to. And we started guiding those investigators. So your current situation now is you have a staff that basically that does not have that direction or someone to point them in whatever direction. Because when you look at an office that's established like that, you have to have legal counsel on board to guide your investigators as to what to go after, what to investigate, because you're the one that makes those determinations. So, in all honesty, without that guidance, you really just have investigators just running in all directions. And when I got back there in November of last year, I saw that. I saw that individuals there was a lot of travel, and I started questioning, well, what are you traveling out there for? What do you, and when they were submitting for travel, and it basically, I think I had one investigator that was legitimately doing her work. I think she's the only one that currently has cases running through the system now. With the other investigators, excluding Mr. Jumbo, he was just a new hire. If anything, people were just traveling to travel. I really didn't see that they were doing their work. And then thereafter, I started assessing each investigator's caseload, and I saw there was a lot of neglect there, a lot of neglect. In fact, one of the investigators had one of the cases that I had personally dealt with back in 2015 or so. And when I was leaving that office to go work elsewhere, I had entered the final chronological log. That same file, the last entry was my entry. And I brought that up to that investigator. I was like, are you serious? So there's been no work since 2015, since I left in that specific case. It was alarming. And quite honestly, I believe that's what the primary issue is there. And in December, when I went before the Nabi with the council, you had delegates who were attacking me, basically challenging me on my credentials, saying that my hiring was done illegally. Without ever even thinking, these individuals never helped that department in trying to get a director there, trying to get the other staffing hired there. They basically were out. It was politics, basically. And I really I found that as just very distasteful and just really bad politics. Their primary concern was to prohibit the work that actually could have been done there. And that's what I asked. It's like, you guys had 4 years to try to help this office, but you did nothing. You could have changed the laws. You could have helped that office bring someone in and to fill those positions. But the reason I believe that it was never done is because if you get someone who's sufficiently or able to do the job there as a presenting officer or as a director, you will have cases that will start moving. And prior to my termination, as they want to call it, I had an illegal ethics complaint filed against me. Now, understand, I can talk about that because I'm a party to that case. I had a delegate that filed an illegal complaint against me. and I disclosed that through my chain of command to show transparency that I was just not going to sweep that complaint on myself under the rug. And they used that against me by saying that I had disclosed confidential records, and so that was the basis of their termination of myself. But in all honesty, I was a party to the case. The delegate had filed a frivolous complaint against me, and that same delegate went ahead and done the same thing with the bar office. She was where I'm a president for the bar. She attempted to actually go after my license there with another frivolous complaint. But thankfully, the Navajo Bar Association don't bend to the whims of corrupt politics. So that was thrown out. That was set aside. So when you look at that, at the time of my release, my I had identified that we had at least 70 subpoenas that we were getting ready to issue for individuals to do interviews, and also to start pulling in records on the claims that were coming through that office. So if anything, that just kind of gives you the background as far as how my termination had come about.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That's a lot to take in. And for those people out there, you know, I think it really, really, we want to know all the finer details. And thank you for kind of giving us an overall picture. But I want to go back to one thing. And that one thing is this, that this office was established in 1984. And it was established on behalf of the Navajo people to protect the interests of the Navajo people, to protect the trust of the Navajo people. And it was focused at tribal elected officials and tribal employees. So anybody off the street can file a complaint against
Yes.
somebody. That office was just one structure. Now, knowing that they're under legislative now, I think I want to know if a file is complaint, the steps precisely that it goes through. Let's say you move it on when a complaint is filed. Does it go to the legislative branch, to the director of legislative services? They review it, or is it a standing committee? What is the exact interface with legislative branch?
As far as filing for a
Filing,
intake,
yeah. Does it
okay.
go to them, or does the
No,
investigation happen unto itself within the office? How does it?
let me give you how it goes. Okay, let's say any person comes in, okay, including this delegate that filed her frivolous complaint. You come in, you're allowed, you're given a form that says intake form. Now, I understand a lot of the times what people will do, what they were doing is they would take that intake form, they would call it an actual complaint, and they would use it, to say, oh, look, I filed a complaint at ethics. For that reason, the form you first fill out is called an intake form. It clearly says it at the top. There's directions on it on how to fill that out. It tells you to give a description on what you're filing for, to attach any records that you want to go on there. When that comes into the office, the receptionist takes up the documents, which she'll do what she has to do, and she'll stamp that in. And then right away, what will happen is she'll put that in the inbox. It'll be for your, and normally how it's supposed to work is it should go to your director, the director or the presenting officer, to be evaluated, to look at, and to be assessed legally to determine if there's sufficient evidence or sufficient facts to back up even initiating an actual investigation. The preliminary inquiry takes place wherein your presenting officer or your director would make that determination. Sometimes you have to call the complaining party. Sometimes they'll wait there to meet with you. You'll sit down, you'll meet with them, you'll interview them to figure out as to what they're trying to do. You'll determine as to whether that's an actual ethics violation. Sometimes some of those cases are best handled through other platforms or venues within the Navajo Nation, to include personnel through HR, or whether it needs to go be filed with the prosecutor's office if it's a criminal matter. And there's numerous things that actually could happen. And once that's determined, then your director, your presenting officer would determine as to what direction it would go. And sometimes if there's sufficient facts to say that there may be an ethics violation, then it gets assigned to one of the investigators. We get them to go out to start interviews, to start issuing subpoenas, pulling in records, any other whatever that they may need to substantiate any of those claims. And of course, when you're looking at this, imagine, I think on average they were receiving about, I think it was about 30 to about 50 intakes per month. So when you're looking at that, and all this time that they haven't had a like legal someone with a legal or a director or presenting officer, you know, I wonder how are they doing that? How are they assessing that? To my I would assume that it's being handled by the interim director. When I listened to her interview last week, it sounded like she's the one that was making those determinations. And that causes a lot of serious concern because she's not barred. She doesn't, she's not a bar member. She doesn't practice law. So I really don't know how that was done. But so it would go through that process. It gets assigned to an investigator. And thereafter, once the investigation is completed, now understand sometimes those investigations turn up to where you have cases that don't have substantial or sufficient evidence. Those cases get closed out. But if it goes on to where there's going to have to be a complaint, then the complaint is drafted by your presenting officer or your director, the person that's barred, and that's filed with OHA. But let's pull back a little bit there. When we're talking about the preliminary inquiry, when we first get the case, when we're just doing the preliminary investigation, there's a lot of things that could happen with that specific case. If you look at the code itself, it actually talks about the sanctions or the authorities of that office as far as what could happen. When you look at the actual sanctions that could be issued, it can be everything from a public reprimand of a person, a private reprimand. If you look at, hold on, let me find it here. If you look at the sanctions section under subchapter 5, subsection 3780, administrative sanctions, it could be if any person is found guilty of violations of the ethics laws, it can result in removal, discharge, or termination from public office or employment according to the Navajo law and procedures. Disqualification from elected offices within the Navajo Nation, public office itself, suspension from public office or employment, forfeiture of all compensations. Accordingly, public employee of Navajo Nation shall be subject to discipline, including suspension without pay or benefits, dismissal, issue of a written public reprimand, which shall be entered into such person's personal records, tournament records, issuance of a private reprimand of such persons without suspension. So when you look at those sanctions, it gives that Ethics and Rules Office overwhelming power as to how to handle specific issues. There are many times that when I was working there, and even in those 76 days, we actually handled some cases. We had issues to where you had individuals with minor offenses like abuses of authority, abuses of power. So where we did reprimand individuals, we brought them in, re-educated them on the law, and advised them your act, your conduct will not be. We would advise them that it was illegal, that is in violation of ethics and rules, and we released them. They went back out. We gave them that opportunity. But understand, but in more serious offenses, it can result in termination. It can result in restitution. And I know within that office itself, I'm surprised that when the investigators were asked whether there was different classifications of like what constitutes filing of a case, what are the more serious offenses. When I was there back in 2013 to about 2012 on up, I think to 2016 or whatever, we established a standard operation memorandum, SOMs. I believe there are 7 that are on the book there. When I got back there in November, I was really surprised that they still had those standard operating memorandums. That's internal. We developed that. I helped draft that, and how we had set that is that how it was to work. Your priority 1 cases were any cases that came from the Auditor General's office that involved any financial indiscretions of at least $10,000 or more. Your priority two were any other cases with financial indiscretions of $10,000 down. Then your priority threes were um, abuses of power, your more minor offenses. So we had set that out. That was to give them guidance. They still have those memorandums that they still give regards to. So quite honestly, I don't understand why those investigators could not tell you or the public that's how they go about assessing which cases are more serious, which cases would be looked at as priorities.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for because that's going to be my next question. We've established the fact that, well, actually, I'm still trying to make that connection. You talked about when the intake takes place and you guys interview, you guys go through, and the case is still at your office. What is the interface?
Mhm.
Do you go to legislative branch? Obviously, you're under the legislative branch. Is there a connection with every case that comes in, and is it reviewed by the legislative branch, the council, or whoever it is
Okay.
from there? Can
Okay.
you
All right. Let
define
me
exactly what that is?
yes. No, let me go and quite honestly, the legislative branch is not supposed to have any dealing within the office as far as how those cases are handled. That's from your director down through the investigators and the support staff. Speaker's office, legislative council, office of legislative services, our chief of staff for the speaker is not supposed to be handling those cases, not supposed to know what's going on in those cases because it's it's not allowed. It's not. And that's how the actual law is actually written. If you look at the Office of Legislative Services Director, his primary responsibility is all admin, not to handle anything from the director down. And so, if anything, no, council, even if council delegates had come in and started to demand that information is not shared with them. It's not supposed to be. So no, it does not go before anyone in the legislative branch except the Ethics and Rules Office.
So then, why is it called that it's under the legislative branch? I don't see the connection.
What do you mean you don't see the connection?
It says right here under the law. Uh,
What section?
it's Resolution CAU 4084, NNC 3741 3793, housed within the legislative branch.
Okay. Yes, that, I mean that basically just says, and I stated before that the Ethics and Rules Office is under the legislative branch. It's a department that's under the legislative branch, and that's been an issue that we've actually have looked at because I think before at one time there was also another speaker that was attempting to get involved or to have a director disclose information on a specific case. And so even though the law states that they are not supposed to interfere with cases, it can be done. It actually can. And how we were looking to address that. There was a lot of work that was done back in Mr. Vernon Roanhorse's time when he was the director there. One of the things we were looking at doing is moving the Ethics and Rules Office out into that fourth branch of government. When you look at the current government structure, there is that actual fourth branch that has not really been developed. I think that was pretty much was the what do they call it? The Nyaja. I think that's like the warrior society or that's where you would have like the actual military, what have you. So there was that fourth branch that we were proposing, and how that was going to work, or how we were looking at that project was your Ethics and Rules Office, EPA, Internal Affairs, in the departments that needed that to be put to not be under any one specific branch of government were supposed to be housed there. And what we were looking at doing, or what we were looking at, was the president was still appoint for the Ethics and Rules Director, confirmation by council, and any issues for disciplinary issues or any termination or anything like that would be handled under the judicial branch. So you still had the three branches involved in appointing directors and how they were going to be handled, but they were not going to have any direct oversight or input in regards to how those offices were to work and how we were looking at the set or setting up for budgeting. It was going to be on a 4 year increment. Every 4 years, any programs that fell under that branch were supposed to come back to the council to report on and showing statistics. If their statistics dropped off, they were not doing anything, which where you, I mean, that's where you have ethics down. Very little
Mm-hmm.
work coming out of there. If that dropped off, then your budget for the next 4 years thereafter would drop as well. If you had increases and you showed that you have adequate, you actually had adequate work being done, then you would have an increase in your budget. That's how we envisioned that. That was the work that we were looking at. In fact, I was actually tasked with that duty. I think in the Law and Order Committee, when I went to the Law and Order Committee meeting in November, shortly after being hired, the Law and Order Committee did give me that task. I think it was Delegate Crotty that was attending, and she had advised me. She was aware of the project that was going on before, and she asked me to continue on that work. And I said that's something that I still wanted to work on if I was allowed to continue to work there. That we were looking to develop that because right now, even though they say legislative branch is not supposed to be involved in these cases, look at what happened. You had a termination of myself. I was qualified for this position. I was hired legally by the former director and the Office of Legislative Services Director, Jalissa Johnson. They hired me by law. There was nothing that was done behind closed doors or anything. Personnel did what they had to do. They assessed my qualifications. They put me in there. But if you think about that, so you really think about how my termination had come about. When you really look at that, legislative had its hands in regards to what we were going to be doing there. Like I said, we started moving on cases. We were fully staffed at the time that I was terminated. So you think about that. We were starting to move on things. We were starting to pull individuals in from chapter houses, school board members, Navajo Nation employees, and there was some very serious cases that were there. I don't know where they may be at now. That's what I kind of worry about because there were some high profile cases that really ethics should be working on. But when you listen, when you look at, there's no filing. I don't see any new cases that have been filed with the Ethics and Rules Office. And get this, you now have a special prosecutor who basically is taking hundreds of, it has to be hundreds of thousands in regards to his retainer for legal fees. And he's what? He's had two sets of complaints that have been dismissed. On the first set, I advised him back in December, hold up. I was advising them to not file as they were going to do because I said it's going to be challenge on jurisdiction. What happened? They filed, and within a couple of weeks, that first set of cases got dismissed. And it's like I don't know, but this is who's working for the Navajo Nation now. A Pelagana attorney with the law firm of the Navajo Nation. When you had someone who was qualified, someone who has had the experience in that office filling that position. So you think about that. Who was involved with that? I still have people through the speaker's office. I have people through the former office I was a part of that call me on a daily basis. They give me information. But the sad thing is I can't tell them, take it to ethics and rules and file. Even in my local chapter, sometimes people raise issues on some of our officials and they want to file. Our joke now is like, well, go ahead, go file with ethics. Nothing's going to get done, you know? And I think that's the reason why our government is where it's at right now. There's no accountability. There really is no an arm within the government that's holding these officials accountable. Look at how disrespectful they are in their actual council sessions. Look at what's going on. Look at the directors that or the attorney generals that were removed. Look at how disrespectful they were to these highly educated Navajos that came back to work for our people. From Beecher to Colin Bradley to Ethel Branch to Ms. Claw. These are individuals that have been practicing law for years off the reservation. Look at how I was treated like trash. And you know, in all honesty, that's exactly what happens when you become, or if you come work for the Navajo Nation. That's what's going on right now. And in my opinion, that's not a place that I want to be. and
Yeah,
hence I am in private practice. Yeah.
right. You know, let's continue to establish a foundation of exactly what the office is, because I think we all need to kind of navigate our way through, as Navajo people out here, the exact steps. And we've so far established that the intake happens, and there is no, you've established that there is no connection directly to any of the council or the legislative branch itself. That's a given. Okay. Now, having said that, there's still some foundational things. Is there a board membership that oversees this? Who is the oversight? This majority of these offices, we've talked about 638s. Everybody has boards. Does this ethics and rules have boards in order to get this oversight, make sure that they're doing their job?
Yes, the Ethics and Rules Office basically, the oversight for ethics and rules is the Law and Order Committee. We do report to them again, but again, it's really limited as far as how they can get into individual cases. They have the authority to influence the actual budgeting. And again, like I said, the budget's been very terrible, it's been very low for so many years. And if anything, so yeah, we do have our oversight would be the Law and Order Committee. And then and so I actually wanted to kind of get back into some of the laws. Remember last week when you had asked the office as to what laws that they enforce, and they gave you a rundown. What was it they said? It was Title III that they were claiming that they enforced. They claimed to enforce Title 10, Title 11, Title 26, which was the laws under Title 3 for grazing, for land board, farm boards, the Title 10 election code. Then you have Title 11 that dealt with education, and Title 26. These are laws that they said they enforce, but no, they're wrong. The laws that the Ethics and Rules Office is responsible for overseeing is found all under Title 2, from 3744 on up through 3767, and that includes stuff that includes general prohibition, conflicts of interest, abstention from official actions, Navajo Nation government contracts, restrictions, and bid requirements. That's exactly what that 24 million, that whole Zenny thing is all about. They have the authority to investigate those types of things. Unauthorized compensation or benefits for official acts. This includes falsifying for or being paid for work that had not been done. Unauthorized personal use and property of funds of the Navajo Nation. That's a big one there. Staff misuse, anti-nepotism. And within the code itself, there is anti-whistleblower or a whistleblower protection within the actual code itself, wherein it protects individuals for reporting of any wrongdoing within the government. But in all honesty, these are the laws that they enforce. There also is the standards of conduct for elected officials. If anything, that was also included a little bit later down the line by the tribal. This all comes from tribal council. You think about that, and those were directly passed for elected officials, because apparently these first set of laws were not being complied with by our elected officials. So the standards of conduct also are the other laws that the ethics and rules enforces.
Yeah, the thing that thank you for. So here's the funny thing. You remember, this is not your interrogation. This is more or less just looking at the law. And from what you just told me at the layman's level, because you're an attorney and I'm not, but I know what's up about, I think I understand this. When I ask you the fact that there's no legislative branch, any interference or influence or oversight, you just told me that law and order is the oversight. That's, to me, that is where the connection to the legislative branch is. So there's a possibility that there could be manipulation. I'm not saying it is, but can you address that? What do you think about that?
Well, again, but I mean, I could actually say that I know that for a fact there are people within the law and order that would not violate that. And I talked about a prior legislative services director, Tom Platero, before as well too, because I have a lot of respect for this individual because he was our director before, and he was one that blocked, or he's the one that would not allow for delegates or for speaker or anyone else like that to actually try to interfere with ethics and rules. There were individuals like that. And also with law and order, I've never seen law and order try to interfere with that. I know that they've always done what they could to assist us, but let me tell you, one way that the legislative branch kind of keeps a hold on the Ethics and Rules Office is with the limited budgeting. The council as a whole has that authority to fund that office adequately. They have the authority to ensure that that office is not that there's no interference there. But it's very hard to even prove that, to say, okay, well, they've been colluding against this office, but look at it. I was in there for 76 days. We were fully staffed. We were starting to move cases. And they decided to go and remove me based on a fact of false complaints. And so I was basically fighting in-house staff there. I was fighting the legislative branch itself. I was fighting delegates, the public. And when I say the public, where I was really getting slammed a lot of the time on a daily basis was you have individuals who filed complaints over 3, 4, 5 years ago. And when I had gotten back to that office, the first thing that I was doing was starting to go through the backlog. I was calling complaining parties. Hey, this is Mr. Morris, current director here. I'm letting you know that I'm taking a look at a complaint you filed 3 years ago. And sometimes people would just cuss me out there. They would get really pissed off. They would like, where were you 2 years ago? Where were you 3 years ago? And some would basically tell me off, and I would have to answer for that because I was the director. But that's how involved I was in these cases. And so and then it takes me back to the current in or the interim director when she was saying they were closing out cases. Did she call these individuals like that? Each one of these cases that gets closed out there should have a letter that goes out to the complaining party to explain why cases are closed. They can't just outright, they shouldn't be just closing out those cases within that office. There has to be an explanation to each person. Now, bear in mind, when I also got there, there was a stack of cases that hadn't been reviewed because you didn't have legal counsel on hand. The office staff there had to work with that $10,000 and to shoot more serious cases over to this contract attorney. And that was not many cases that were being reviewed like that. So, and again, so going back to when you're talking about the legislative branch, its influence over what that office can do, it goes to funding. Council's primary duty is to allocate funding for all the departments. If you underfund an actual office like that, an office that holds government officials accountable, what does that do? You're not gonna you're not gonna be able to hold people accountable. So
Yeah.
that tells you there. Yes, there's law that says
Well,
they are that they can't do that, but it can
yeah.
be done.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course. I mean, you just said it. I mean, somehow, somewhere, there's a parallel between the influence from the legislative branch. But then here's again another level of questions because I want to get into some of the issues that I've been hearing out here.
Sure.
The first one is this: is your own firing. You just said somebody from the legislative branch file a complaint against you with these frivolous charges, you call it, and you were fired or you were let go. That's a legislative influence. How can that be described as not being legislative influence?
That's actually corrupt politics. I don't think it's a legislative. It's not a response or not a duty of the legislative branch. That's corrupt politics right there. So when you're talking about that, so in a sense, but so I would say that would be political corruptness' influence on an office like that, as opposed to saying it's just legislative. Yes, it was a member of the legislative branch that helped institute that and also file that frivolous complaint.
So if that's the case, then um, they must have. I mean, there's got to be a reason why either they've noted there's something that you're doing against their department, their chapter, themselves, or whatever, and somehow that was information that got back to them. I mean, somebody has got, I mean, that's where I'm trying to establish just how that's the uniqueness of your departure. How did that happen? Like,
Well,
did they charge against somebody what you're doing because the way you looked, what you're driving? What was it? If you don't mind me asking.
it was because I was doing my work. And quite honestly, if you really want to take a look at the interaction between myself and the council, go to the Nabi meeting. Go, you can find it on YouTube. It was in December. I think it was December 11th. I was summoned there to talk about the transition that ethics and rules was going into after the other director retired. They summoned me there. But you what? You look at that interaction. That'll tell you everything right there. That'll tell you everything there. That's when I mean, I knew when I was coming into this position, it was going to be highly political. And I had just come over from DOJ. And that's another thing. If you watch that Nabi meeting, the interaction there, what they try to get out of me is to determine it's like, oh, Mr. Morris is coming over from DOJ. Just by being working for DOJ, I was branded as being a Boo Nygren supporter, that I was being sent down the hill there to go and disrupt all the investigations that may have been pertaining to him. But in all honesty, with DOJ, I was assigned to the chapter unit. I was working with Roderick Begay, and that we're one of the units that was that worked directly with the public. I had nothing to do with what was going on with the whole thing with Zenny, all of that. I was working with chapters, but I was branded as being DOJ. And I think everyone, everyone did. Everyone was in a panic when I first got to that office. Where is this guy coming from? And the thing that they determined was that I was coming from DOJ, so they just assumed that I was going to be going down there just to stop all investigations as far as what was pertaining to Zenny. But in all honesty, I can go on record and say I don't support no political individual at this time. I don't. I never did.
Yeah,
I never did. I was there for
yeah.
a purpose.
Okay, and then going on to, does the ethics and rules have jurisdiction over to IHS facilities or 638s or the enterprises, or is it strictly just for the government itself?
When you look at those types of organization entities, including like when you look at school boards or what have you, the jurisdiction for ethics ends with your elected officials, individuals that may make up the board itself. We didn't have jurisdiction over like staff or other members that fell under the board. So when you're looking at those types of programs, and I know that you ask a lot of questions about 638 programs, but it just depends. You got to look at as far as which individuals are elected into office. If they're elected into office or they receive any type of payment from any Navajo Nation coffers, whether it be from the chapter, legislative branch, executive, judicial, we may have jurisdiction over them. So that's where, like for instance, even with schools, our jurisdiction ends with the school board. We wouldn't be able to go after the principals. We would not be able to go after staff. It ends with the school board, the people that are elected into office.
Okay, the thing that's interesting to me about this whole ethics and rules, basically right now, I haven't heard one positive thing from anybody. And it goes from the branches to branches to branches to chapters to chapters to chapters and individuals to individuals. Now, no doubt, and then again, these investigators, this is the primary question that I have. And you were there as the executive director. And I'm looking at the resolution LOCJA0213 is basically the plans of operation, establishing the rules for processing the citizen's complaint. In there, I don't see a checklist. The only thing that you've mentioned in terms of determining the importance of these complaints is the the level of money. Like I can't remember what you said was the 50,000 something something. You gave three different examples of what that money was involved. But there's some things that are like, for instance, like I'm glad you brought up the Zenny home. The Zenny home, obviously, number one, the public knows about
Mm.
that. It's such a public. $24 million is missing, and everybody's pointing finger at each other. I don't think anybody needs to file with ethics. I think ethics should just taken that thing on and prosecuted somebody, if not the whole entire Navajo Nation government. What happened there? Why is this thing ongoing? And the people that are involved from the legislative branch and also the executive branch are now running for office. Doesn't that violate some of the basic qualification for running for office as a for presidential candidate? What do you think about that?
Okay, with regards to Zenny Home, you got to remember that that through the Office of Legislative Counsel, there's a special prosecutor that's overseeing any investigation or prosecution of Zenny. Now, when I got into ethics and rules, that office back in November of last year, I had two. There were two investigators that were primarily that were handling those cases. They, to my knowledge, they had no direction coming from the special prosecutor. They had no direction coming from anyone. They were just investigating. And they, at the briefing, the first briefing they gave me, they advised they had over 70 interviews compiled, plus countless amounts of evidence that was attained. My primary concern that I had raised immediately, I think from day one, was okay, we're not the special prosecutors. We have our authorities, we have our cases that we need to look into. There was special prosecutors that were hired to look into that. So if anything, I had advised those the investigators to start to wrap up what they were doing, and to transfer all of that, whatever they investigated, over to the special prosecutors, because that was their responsibility. That was not ours. There was no reason for ethics and rules to be running right alongside the special prosecutors doing the same investigation. That's wasted resources, in my opinion. So they were pulled off of that. We packaged that up, and that was given over to the special prosecutors because that was their responsibility. Now, this $24 million, quite honestly, when you really look at that, everyone's focused in on that because every politician has been focused in on the 24 million. They've been pointing the finger across the street over there to the migrant administration, but they fail to even address any of the issues within their own branch. And that's the reason why Zenny, everyone talks about Zenny. Just recently, there was all discussions on the insurance, CKP. Then there was issues on, I think, I forget what the other one was. There was another organization where millions of dollars are unaccounted for, and there was questions being put out there. We don't know about those things. Then you talk about qualifications for elected officials. Let me tell you, I also was the executive director for during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I was the executive director for elections administration. That's another legislative branch department that is severely underfunded and severely neglected. They still have a database that runs off of a 1990s system. What always scared us was that's all the voter register the registered voters information is kept on an ancient computer, and one by one these computers were breaking down. I'm surprised, and so that office has been severely neglected as well. But when you look at qualifications, you're asking me about that for elected officials. It varies from your president, from your council delegates, to your chapter officials, to the school board. I think the school board has the most stringent qualification standard, to wherein you have to have qualification or background checks that go back to people, or to when a person turns 18. That should be across the board, in my opinion. You should have thorough background checks to include even civil judgments against individuals for financial malfeasance. There should be criminal record checks that go all the way back to a person's 18th birthday, quite honestly. But right now, when you look at the elections code, you have various qualification requirements for various officials. That goes directly to the board there for the election supervisors. I'm surprised no one's ever really looked at that. But remember, I think last week you and I were discussing, and you were talking about the whole language equivalency thing with Deschini. That's where it came. That's where it changed. But in
Yeah.
all honesty, I do believe that qualifications for any elected official needs to go back to the time that are 18. When I look at the roster now for some of these individuals that are running for office, I'm appalled that some would even want to be running for office again after. And that's the thing. I know of things because I've seen things when I was over with ethics and rules before. I'll go in all the way back to the discretionary fund times. Now you have individuals coming back from that time that were convicted, individuals that really should not be qualified. But the way they become qualified is when you look at the final orders. Sometimes it'll say that they're disqualified for up to 5 years. If they sit out for 5 years, they become qualified again. Sometimes the orders will say
Hmm.
or until restitution is paid in full.
Yeah.
And there was one instance I had from one of the communities. They called me. They said, "Why is so and so going to be running for office again? Why is she running for office? She was convicted of whatever." And and when I looked into the case, I said, "Let me look into that." When I had looked into the case, the way the order was written, it said that she was be qualified. She would sit out for 5 years, and after 5 years, or until she paid off restitution. And this individual paid all the restitution back to the Navajo Nation, so that made her qualify.
Right.
So
But
it just depends.
yeah, but then again, I mean, I'm not trying to pick on anybody specific, but just that the fact that, there is a law and a law is a law and some regulations. And I don't know how. I'm glad you brought this up about the elections office because I think, yeah, you're right. I think there's even the vetting, like the case with Christus Cheney. A lot of people say, oh, yeah, Christus Cheney should have never filed. Well, I agree, but he did. So where did that break down? Obviously, the office didn't vet and then right now we have, just like we said, there are people that are running right now, and it goes back to the ethics because, like for instance, like some big cases, I can think of the president's P card, you know, uh, that was a big 24,000 dollars was alleged missing, and that was filed, and that came in from several different angles, and nobody. I mean, ethics. It was definitely filed with ethics, and I've got people who can substantiate the fact that ethics interviewed these individuals, but it's a high profile. $24,000 or $24 million is kind of coincidental, but it's there. But why hasn't that case even come forward? What do you think's the hang up over at ethics and rules?
Okay, let me first of all say, with regards to individual cases like that, to be honest, if you look at the actual statutes of limitation for, as far as how far back ethics can go to look at issues or complaints, it that was amended. It goes to 5 years. No action shall be brought under this chapter after 5 years from the date of formal notice. So, from the time that a case is reported, ethics and rules has up to 5 years to get going with the actual prosecution of any or investigation and prosecution of cases. Now, understand when you're talking about these types of cases, sometimes when these types of things are going on, it's not readily known. Sometimes it takes about 2 years after the actual wrongdoing starts. Like, for instance, if someone starts embezzling money on a chapter level, it'll take you maybe even 4 years after they leave office to find out that they were doing that. So from the time, and that was the reason why they changed the statute of limitation to read that way. It's from the time that it gets reported to Ethics and Rules Office. Because when you're talking about white collar crimes or these types of cases, you don't find out until a person is ready to leave office. Now, if you look at, you're talking about P card, if anything, that's another thing. It would not only be that specific office if there was a filing on that. E-cards travel by Navajo Nation officials, Navajo Nation employees. It's just excessive. I've always wanted to have that looked into because you have people who travel just to travel. Like I said, when I got back into that office, I had people that were, one day and going to Albuquerque. Next day, they said, "Oh, they got to go to Cayenta or to go elsewhere." And I started to question those things. It's like, well, what are you doing? What are your interviews? What case does this pertain to? And I was starting to reel that in. Travel is one of the most abused. privileges that people use on the Navajo Nation. There's a lot of money there. I wouldn't be surprised as far as um, that just as far as like how much misuse there is. P cards. You think about it now, our officials, they all, it really, when they're going to Washington, going to Santa Fe, going to Albuquerque, whatever, it requires mileage, it requires lodging, food.
per
You
diem.
think about that. Yeah, per diem, that all adds up. You think about it. A real Natani would not be looking just to get that, but that's what it's come down to. That's what government officials are doing now. Think
Yeah,
about it. If if
yeah,
if um if Manuelito was our chief Manuelito was waiting for a P card to be paid out on P card stipends or looking just to travel on the Navajo Nation dollar, we'd still be sitting over there in Bosque Redondo. Our true
yeah,
leaders in the past didn't do that. But in this day and age, it's one of the most abused things that we have with the Navajo Nation government. You
yeah,
see tribes going down to Phoenix, parked at malls, restaurants, and what,
yeah,
it's one of the things that is most abused.
yeah. And that's one of the things that I
Go ahead.
always said. I mean, through all of my podcasts, uh,
Yeah. Cal,
these
what, Cal,
yeah,
Cal, I'm sorry to cut you off, but if anything, you were saying that there are people who said that they had filed for, or they
yes,
filed complaints,
yeah,
intakes on P cards. What I would advise anyone that is listening in is that if you filed an actual intake and you know that it was filed and you never received any type of response, go back and demand for a status as to what happened in that case. Because if these cases are closed out, there should be some type of documentation to say as to why it was closed out. And again, that's the way it's supposed to be done. So if anyone out there has any case that they know they filed and they want a status on it, go hold them accountable. Go to the office, go through the legislative branch, up through the speaker's office, demand for some of these answers. You have that right. As you stated before, this office was formed to allow for your average person to be able to go in to file on their government officials.
yeah. The thing that I have problems with actually about this that was amended in 2017 about the Office of Ethics and Rules. I personally have a problem with this statute of limitations. I mean, um, I think 5 years or whatever the time frame is, I think that's really ridiculous because here's another thing too. I mean, there's always kind of, well, there's the principle of the law and there's the letter of the law. You know, by applying the letter of the law, of course, you would adjudicate or at least investigate a case that was filed immediately rather than, okay, well, why would a case I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. I'm a businessman. I get a project coming in. I execute that dang thing, sometimes up to a week to deliver my product. There is no freaking excuse for ethics and rules to sit on anything for even a year. That's ridiculous. I don't get it. How does that happen? People are frustrated. Can you help define that?
Yeah, Cal, honestly, I would say that it comes down to government complacency. I'm in private practice now. If I don't do what I'm supposed to, I don't get paid. My clients will fire me. If you don't do what you're ordered to do by your clients, you'll be fired. But when you get into the government sector, people get their 8 to 5. If they're going to be just sitting in the office, traveling, or, really, it comes down to government complacency. It's not only an issue with the Navajo Nation. I seen it in the military. When I was in the military, I seen a lot of government complacency. When I was at the state, I seen that. So, but when you're talking about the private sector business, if you don't put out, you're not going to make no money. You're gonna run your own business into the ground quickly. That's the difference. It's government complacency.
Yeah, and that proves exactly what I've been saying all along about this. People getting elected and getting to elected office. All it is just they're getting the job. There's no more public service involved anymore, and I think that's one of the things that's happening here with this office. You know, and, and again, one of the things I just do not understand a case that is so huge, like even this sexual allegation that happened with the office of vice president. We heard it in the news. It's Navajo Times wouldn't just print something and just leave it at that. It did happen, and I've heard one side of the story. I've heard another side of the story, but obviously, ethics and rules. When you talk about ethics, that means something. It's just not a word. Ethics is morality or standards. What do we stand by? And if you're an elected official and you're doing something and even somebody filing on you, that goes for the president, that goes for the speaker. As far as I'm concerned, I think for this 24 million missing dollars, everybody's pointing at the president of the Navajo Nation. I'd say it's everybody that's in the council, everybody that's over in DOJ, and including the executive branch, the entire Navajo Nation. Somebody ought to file an ethics against everybody about that whole thing. So here's the thing. Why are these things of this magnitude just getting stalled? And if we can address that, can you imagine how many chapters have called me about this whole situation, that they've filed stuff and nothing's going on? And they firmly believe that the statute of limitation, that the Office of Ethics and Rules are specifically on purposely dragging their feet so that when the 5 years comes up, clock, sorry. In fact, some people are telling me that papers are lost. Paperworks are lost, gone, disappeared. They have no idea. This person with this P card missing said that they called ethics and rules, and nobody is even replying to that person anymore. Those are problems. What do you think should happen here?
Cal, let me go back. You did mention something about the 160, or no, you mentioned all the individuals that should be held accountable for this whole Zenning thing that everyone keeps going back to. You're actually correct. When you talk about that process, that 164 process on how a contract is reviewed, you have numerous departments, numerous hands, numerous divisions, or numerous professionals that handle that process. And quite honestly, all the way, it requires these individuals to look at these contracts to ensure and safeguard the Navajo Nation's dollars. So you're right. And I do believe, I agree with what you're saying, is that, everyone that basically was in office that had some fiduciary responsibility, legal responsibility to that process itself, they're all involved. Where is it that we get that 164 process? How do we go about reviewing these contracts? These are tools that come down from BNF, the Budget and Finance Committee, the council, and those are tools that are given over to the administrative side. So, and you look at that, and who employs them? You got the presidents. I mean, from the the executive side, legislative, those are all employees. So really, the whole Navajo Nation, there are so many people that could probably be that are involved with that, and it just they let it slide. They let that money, and it's gone through it's gone. And when you think
Yeah,
about that, one other thing that you were talking about is like, or one thing that you and I really have not started to discuss is how would you fix this? These problems are so great sometimes when you
yeah.
think about it. It
We'll
can give you a
we'll get to
headache.
that.
But
We
one
will get to
okay,
that. Let me.
well, hold on, Kyle. Let me just say that I've been talking with some individuals that are running, and I hope that some of these individuals are gonna be, if they get into office, that they can look at some of these things. The former ethics director, Lunel Harrison's running. I don't know if you know that he's running for a
Oh
council
yeah,
delegate position.
I interviewed him. Yeah,
I pray that he gets in because he knows what's going on out there.
yeah. That's the thing that I don't get still. Is that how the fees disconnect are happening? But then again, you've got. I mean, you know, um, I guess that's going to be, yeah, exactly going to be the next thing. Is that while we're seeing these problems ongoing, I mean, there's no end. But one thing I'd like you to seriously address, do you think that the Office of Ethics and Rules might be dragging their feet on purpose to allow this statute of limitations to happen.
To be honest, I will say that I don't believe it's intentional. I just they've been neglected. Like I said, the staff that's even there, I'll even speak up for them. They don't have a captain. They don't have someone there that's directing them as they should be working. It's been like that for years. They've gotten used to that. That complacency has really set in. And to be honest, I really believe if you can get someone in there that can man that office as it's supposed to be ran, then so be it. And to my knowledge, they have a new. There was a person that was hired as of Monday. I don't know what experience this person has, but I just say, good luck to them, and I wish them well. I wish them all the success that they can have in that office. But to practice that type of law, that type of administrative law, it's unique. It's a little different. It's not like criminal law. It's not like other cases like probate or family law. When you go into that specific office, that setting, it's a unique place to be. And the persons who yield or run that office, they yield so much power. They have so much authority as to what direction to take a case. They can decide to prosecute a case. They can decide as to how to handle that. But as far as to say that if I believe that they're intentionally trying to run down the statutes of limitation, I don't think so. I really don't. I would hope not. But of course, it's possible. But you're right. The statute of limitation sometime runs. Even the times that I was there was some cases going back to the discretionary fund cases. There were many cases that just went to the wayside because the statute of limitations ran at that time, back in that time. And it was disappointing because, like I said, I know of one individual that's running right now that had taken a large amounts of money and that whole discretionary fund fiasco. That was the $24 million of years ago. And when I was interviewing this individual with their spouse, the spouse actually told me to my face, "I'm glad, I'm happy, I'm glad that we stole that money. Now we have educated children." I was so shocked. I was shocked when this person told this to me. They're in the ethics and rules conference room. Had told me that they were that the individual was glad they took the money because they have educated children. The only response I could have or I had for this person was, you know what? If my parents were thieves, maybe I would be more educated than I am. But so, to that extent, there are people out there that exist out there that will say stuff like that, that operate at that level. And now I see this person on the ballot again, and I'm like, oh God,
Yeah,
woe
you
unto
know,
the Navajo Nation.
that's the thing that's really, really perplexing to me is that this ongoing systemic abuse of being in the elected office. Because to me, I just look at it as they're applying for a job. Now, here's the another problem that I seriously have, and I want you to help us through this. In 1984, the ethics and rule was established, and the separation happened in 2012 with Resolution CO 4512, and that's where ethics and rules was established as under the legislative branch, while the Office of Hearings and Appeal was then established to go under the executive branch as the final judge of every complaint. I see that, and I don't have to be a law person. I'm just using common sense, and that is if a case is filed or a complaint is filed, goes to the ethics, and being under the legislative, somehow there's going to be that interface somehow. Law and order. I'm not saying that but there's that. But then if the case moves forward, it goes over to the Office of Hearings and Appeal, which, by the way, is now under the executive branch. And that the executive branch and the legislative branch, they don't see eye to eye. I don't know how the Navajo people is going to win in this type of a setup. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the intention when that was done, I mean, you would just assume you're kind of talking about separations of powers within the branches of government between the executive and legislative branch. I think when it was envisioned, when they had given the assignment over to OHA, OHA hears other cases. They don't just deal with ethics. They hear employment cases. They hear election cases. They hear numerous types of administrative or cases, basically. And I think the intention behind that, of course, that was formed under the legislative, and then you got the executive branch, and then you have legislative where ethics sits. I think its intent is to ensure there is that separation of government there to protect individuals. Because if you imagine if you had OHA sitting under legislative as well, then there would be serious conflicts that could arise down the line. But I think the way it's set, it's supposed to work. And I know I can say that, in all the years I've dealt with OHA, I've never seen them underhand us. I've never seen them do anything that would be contrary to law. And I know that they've done the best that they could for these cases that come through. Of course, OHA can only hear the cases that are being filed by ethics and rules. Right now, when you just listen to the interim director last year or last week, she was just saying that the only things that they're dealing now are with order to show cause cases. She said she didn't mention any new cases. When she talks about these order to show cause cases, these cases come back from the time that I was there, time that was before me, the people that were prosecuted and that still owe money to the Navajo Nation. So those are the only cases that they're basically bringing into OHA right now. To my knowledge, I haven't not heard of any new cases that have been filed. I think the special prosecutor has a couple of cases that are going over there right now. But the way it was set up, it was to be, I think it was purposely done to be in two separate branches of government because really you're not supposed to have those two branches of government to be able to collude like that. You want them to be separate, just like the president's office sits over there with executive and legislative. But you're right, they don't work together. They don't work together. It's just, and again, that goes down to politics and just unprofessional behavior, in my opinion. Mr. Nez.
Are you still there?
Oh
Are you
yeah, you went out there for a little bit.
okay? I'm sorry about that. Um, so um, I think if there's anything else that you can think of that problems, I'm going through all of the problems of what we can possibly think about because like I've talked about the high profile, the Zenny home, the P card,
Sure,
the sex allegation, all of that. But it's still dormant. They're dead. We don't know what's going on with them.
sure.
Um, is there a chance that these investigators? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to word this. Is there a chance that there could be their own personal their own personal judgment as why that these things are not moving forward? Or do they have to follow the letter of the law by doing a checkoff list? What do you think?
Okay, now you were talking about checkoff list. I know you were asking for that office for a check if they have a checkoff list. Those types of things can be developed. I think when we envision those standard operating memorandums back when I was still with that office, that was sort of the idea. There was forums, we envisioned at the time, I think the chief legislative counsel was Levon Henry, also another really good Navajo attorney, and he was working with us. He was assigned, and we had working groups with him. I think there was also former President Russell Begay, a lot of good people that were in on that project. And our idea at the time was to create an actual guidance for the office to go off of. So those standard operating memorandums was what we had formulated. And, that office, according to the interim director, she had stated that they were starting to develop certain procedures internally. I support them in that. I think they should. With this new director that they have, maybe if they would work with her, they could develop that to ensure that as each case comes in, that it's handled a specific way. But understand, every case that comes through that door is not always the same issue. Sometimes you'll have complaints on just abuses of authority, where you have a chapter official that may be getting involved in hiring PEP or firing PEP, or another elected official that may have gone to a conference and got drunk there. Or you may have where you have a Navajo government official that's sexually harassing someone. So you get all sorts of different. You get very sensitive stuff that you deal with. So when you're looking at that ethics and rules office, you can come up with a general checklist to help you navigate as to how to process those cases. But it requires you to have all team members on board. You need to have someone with legal knowledge, legal skills, that qualification. You got to have the investigators as well. You got to be able to look at everything and to determine that. Now, let me tell you, those investigators, yes, some of them have over 20 years of law enforcement experience. I don't want to just keep bashing on them, but some of them have really extensive law enforcement.
But there's only four of them, right?
Right now, yes, there's four of them, and the one thing that they didn't mention is they have an investigator there who is a forensic auditor. This guy is an auditor. He came from Auditor General's office. He also has very extensive knowledge. And in fact, when we hired him, I was one of the ones that sat on his interview panel, and we chose him based on that because we thought, it'd be good to have him on board. This guy can find everything, like through the FMIS, the system within the Navajo Nation. He was able to pull all sorts of things. You just ask him for something, he was going out to get that. And in fact, when he came on board, I started assigning all of the cases from the Auditor General over to him because he knew their process and very knowledgeable. And again, you have individuals there that have over 20 years. Some of them retired. I think two of them retired from law
Yeah.
enforcement before they came over. So they have extensive um, investigator background. The former director, Mr. Harrison, also has extensive knowledge. He's one individual that can tell you. You sit down and talk with him, he'll tell you how that office should run. And the one thing I can say is he always stood up to speaker. He always stood up to the people in legislative branch and reminded them that they could not interfere with the processes of ethics and rules. That's one
Mm,
thing that he stood by.
mm.
Once he left, it seemed like it was open house. It was open
Yeah.
house, and
Thank,
it's
thank
crazy.
you.
But
Thank you. Thank you. That's exactly what yeah, there is. It's, there's some sort of a connection there. And I think everybody knows. But, you know, so what do we do? What do we do? What do we do with that office? What's the solutions?
I Solution number one, amend the codes. Get that project going again to amend the current codes that are on. When you read some of some of the actual code or the actual law, some of it is just, it's a little confusing. And when you look, I believe that whomever that drafted these laws took ethics laws from another jurisdiction, brought it over, stamped wherever that jurisdiction it came from, and put Navajo. And basically, they took, and that's what happens a lot of the times when these laws are generated or they come to the Navajo Nation. They take it from other jurisdictions. A lot of this, well, when we were going through the amendment, doing the workshops and the work sessions, there was a lot of things that we had removed. There was a lot of things that we were even looking to add in, like for instance, we were looking at like if a person is not, what the heck was that we were, it'll come to mind. But there were additions that we were wanting to include in these laws to include like if an individual is not doing their job, not showing up for chapter meetings, for council sessions, that they could be removed. Because I think in the 23rd council there was one council delegate that never went to a law and order meeting because he did not get along with the chair, and that person should. And quite honestly, that's like not showing up for work. But And then you have chapter officials that will not show up for chapter meetings, and you have dereliction of duty. That's it, dereliction of duty. There were other things that we were looking at. So the one first thing would be to amend these codes, get going on that, adequately fund that office, give it all the resources that it needs, all the legal professionals. At the most, I'd say you should have at least four attorneys within that office. You also need to beef up investigations. You need at least an additional four investigators. And if anything, there was also talk, I know there was talk about trying to reform some type of hearing body specifically for ethics and removing that from OHA, because OHA does get overwhelmed with a lot of the cases, other cases that they have to handle. So though, I mean, that would be a start to get that office moving in the right direction. And lastly, I think what's going to be most invaluable for that office is to remove it out from any of the branches of government, to form it under that fourth branch of government, to remove the direct oversight from legislative, executive, even judicial, and to have it sit out on that side. Put IA out there, the internal affairs, put EPA, some of these other the departments that need to not have or to worry about being persecuted in a council meeting or being persecuted by administrative actions under the executive branch. That would be a step in the right direction. But again, we'll see what happens. I don't know. If you look at the budget right now, it's very low. It's one of the lowest budgets, I think, that sits with the legislative branch right now. And you're always
What do you
talking
think?
about these
What do you,
Natanis,
what do you think is the
these
budget?
Natanis that are hold on. Yeah, well, these Natanis that are running, they always talk about accountability, transparency. But in all honesty, they don't support the resources that would allow for transparency or for accountability. And what do I think about the budget? It needs to be increased. But I know Navajo Nation's looking
What
at
is it? What's the
that.
total?
Honestly, I don't have the paper. I don't have. I forget. Honest, I think it was off. Let me think. I don't want to give wrong information. What I could do is probably give you a follow up on that to give you what the last fiscal budget was, and that's public record. Actually, that could be found out there. But I'll be happy to share that with you, Cal, so I don't give wrong information. But it's one of the departments that has the least amount of budget.
Yeah, well, no doubt there's a problem, with budgets. And I think, I mean, one could come to the conclusion that that is purposely done. Just give enough just to allow that office to sustain. And I think not only that is that the current staff, I mean, I frankly was very disappointed. Like I said, interviewing them, they didn't give much information. They were very tight-lipped, and I think that's purposely and calculated to cover their job, because if anything that they divulge any information, anything like that jurisdiction, I felt like they didn't understand their job description. And so when I ask you what you think could be um, the remedies for these, and that's, you mentioned amending the code. Amending the code, I think, is, much more legislative workload, trying to establish what's going to be most important. That's going to be, what exactly is going to be the amending the code. I do agree with funding the office so that you have, greater staff. And the foremost, and I'm glad that you said this, but those two offices, ethics and rules, and office and appeal, need to be taken away from the executive and legislative. And I thought I was going to recommend being it over in judicial, but you brought up a different, a fourth branch. That's a real peculiar. I like that. I actually like that because it takes all the thing away from the three branches. So, I just don't, by this right now, the way that the office is, I just don't see any progress happening for the next year and a half. Maybe with this new director coming in, I don't know. They didn't even have the courtesy to, during that interview, to name the who's coming in. So, and I think there's some people also suggested that, it sounded to me with your firing or with your dismissal, you know, um, there might be some retaliation even from within your own staff. You are doing the job, you're doing it right, and you are breaking the codes of what ethics and rules were doing to just fulfill their job. What do you think I might be wrong? What do you think?
No, I actually would agree with you on that because, like I said, I was fighting internally. And to my knowledge, I actually was I was privy to information that there were numerous complaints. And I think even if you view that Nabi meeting in December, the one delegate was accusing me of work creating a hostile work environment, and they were trying to allude to that. But in all honesty, there was no hostile work environment. My supervisory style is to get things done. I am firm in what I stand by. I believe in what I do. And it's sort of set, I guess it comes from the military standpoint. But I was always fair with everyone there. And I was even told that there was even a complaint that went over to law and order. And I had requested for copies of that through my chain of command. I even requested for a copy of that complaint from the complaining party. It never was furnished to me. I also understand there were numerous complaints that were sent up. I think, I don't know, through the speaker's office or whomever within the legislative branch. I was never privy to any of those complaints. I was never allowed to respond to some of those things that were coming up. And I even had staff that had reported that they were aware of such things, and they would contest that. They would be able to go on record to show that if anything, I did shore up travel. I did shore up that individuals were doing their work. I did, like I said, I found a lot of cases that were not being handled appropriately, and I was demanding. I was asking them to give me cases to file every week. We had staffing to know where everybody was going, what cases they were working on, and I would say that what cases you guys have for me to file? What do you guys have? And so, but in all honesty, even in that short amount of time, the investigators were starting to push some of the cases that were just sitting. So
I,
they need someone on board like that. They need that guidance. They need, because after all these years, they've come to the point to where they're just become complacent
I
to
think the
do what they
budget.
want to do.
I believe the budget for the ethics and rules was $197,000 fiscal year. So if you divide that up between four people, that's a pretty good pay, including taking care of the office. So it that's incredible to me. I mean, that's a lot of money. It really is a lot of money. That's more than
Not,
enough to, like
not,
for
not, not necess-
four
Not
people right
necessarily.
now.
When you look at that actual budget itself, you got to look at how much goes, because you got to rent. They have to rent those vehicles again. Like I said, with travel, there's office supplies. It goes down quickly. I can guarantee that those individuals do not make a lot of money. Those investigators that are there, I was really surprised. In fact, from the I actually took over a $10,000 pay cut just to go from DOJ to ethics and rules. But I
Hmm.
did that because I wanted to work there. I wanted to go back and try to help that office. So you think about that. I mean, it may look like that on the surface, but in all honesty, once that money starts to go out, and again, 10 grand of that automatically goes over to contractual services, and there's other things that they have to pay for there. Like I said, I don't have the exact budget numbers and everything, but it's
What do
it's
we
always been under budget.
what do we do about another thing that I've had people talk about too is how I'm not sure if it's ethics and rules or office of hearings and appeal, but there's a judge that actually adjudicates these cases out of Colorado. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. Why are we sole sourcing or subcontracting out?
Well, the reason that exists like that, because when you think about it, when you're looking to hire an attorney, he is Navajo, the guy that oversees those cases for ethics and rules. He's Navajo, good attorney as well. And I think what it comes down to is when you're looking for these contractual services, depends on who puts bids in. I believe his law firm put a bid in and won the bid. So when you're looking at that, of course, you have to be registered or it has to comply with the Navajo Business Employment Preference Act, the business regulatory. You have to be properly registered with all that to be considered for contracts. So I think, if anything, I know with that hearing officer out of Colorado that he's one of the few law firms that is fully um, or has everything in order and is able to bid for stuff like that. Now, when you keep talking about Office of Hearings and Appeals, remember that's a completely different department. Ethics and rules, they just merely hear the cases that we have. They also sign off on subpoenas that we ask for. They're like the judges. We don't have that communication on individual cases because, again, that goes back to ex parte communication. We don't have that, or the ethics and rules does not engage with them that way, and they're not supposed to.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I guess the last question, the last subject that I like to talk to you about is that we know there's problems and there are no immediate solutions, but I like to at least hunt for one. What do you think is needed right now? I'm not trying to say you should influence, but yeah, I mean, us people out here, you've been in that office and the people are complaining out here. I filed, nothing's going on. What do you think is going to jumpstart that? And I mean, it seems like it's just a stalemate. Large cases that should disqualify so many candidates are they're not moving.
Mhm.
What's going on? How do we move on now?
Well, I think it's going to come from the grassroots. It's going to come from the people out there to be making or demanding for answers from every politician that's in office, from your chapter officials to your delegates to the president's office, vice president's office, your speaker, and every council delegate. It's going to, people need to start asking or demanding for answers. This includes for your directors, these individuals that oversee these offices, because we work, or when we're in when you're in those types of position, you work for the people. You're supposed to. But again, there's just no accountability there because people become complacent. They're used to reporting just to go clock in for 8 to 5, and Lord knows what it is that people do. I think we've investigated people that would sometimes not show for work. I've seen it myself. In fact, I've seen individuals that are supposed to be in the office 8 to 5 here in Window Rock. You come and there people are on travel or they work from home. There's some people that still work from home. It just really comes down to each department doing what they're supposed to. And but again, if you go into a position like that, you start to do your work as you're supposed to, you become the target. People will start to look to remove you because you're holding them accountable. You're making them work for every hour, every penny that they make in that hour. You make them accountable for using Navajo Nation property and resources.
Exactly. It's just it's just I'm really frustrated, and I think a lot of people are frustrated. That's why I wanted to do this interview. I think you've cleared a lot of stuff up, but there's still a lot of questions. I think right now what I'm hearing from the community is that people are inquiring. They are contacting the current staff at the Office of at the Ethics and Rules, but nothing is taking place. Nothing's happening. It's just a stalemate, and nothing's moving forward. Um, we can talk about it all we want to and try to hold these people accountable. Election cycle is happening now. There's a lot of questions about who's actually qualified to run. That's one of the biggest things. That's an interface with the elections office. And I don't see an immediate solution. No matter how much people complain about this, you know, there's still 4 people that are working there. The sense that I got is that they're tight-lipped and they're pretty much a little groupie. They're going to protect each other's interests. So anyway, let's close this up. I really appreciate you being here, you being candid with us, and sharing what some of the positives as well as the negatives of what's going on. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this discussion, Mr. Morris? Thank you very much again.
You're welcome. And I thank you, Cal, for allowing me to get this out because, and quite honestly, when all this was what was going on, individuals had asked, or even HR was surprised that I didn't challenge my termination. They did not challenge me, or no, they were wondering why I was not challenging my termination. But then when I really looked at it in that time, because I already anticipated that the termination was coming, I think the beginning of December, January, I was seeing things. I was seeing patterns develop. I was observing um, staff members running off for like private meetings, and I was aware people talk, people like, oh, this is what's going on here, this is what's going on, and I was aware. So then I thought in my mind, okay, I got to have plan B. What is going to be the next move should I get terminated? And I thought, yeah, I practice law. I could challenge if they come at me for termination. But when it came down, I was so disgusted just with that act itself by the puppets, the individuals that actually came in to actually terminate me. And I was just like, oh, wow, these individuals don't know, but they basically are being used. And I decided to burn that bridge because I knew that even if I challenged it, I would still have to come back and work with these individuals. And is it worth my time to even go back there and to try to, even if I did win, if I won that termination, I could have come back. But it's like I still would have been a part of that broken system, one man against a whole system of corruption. So I decided that I was not going to do that. But as part of my plan, I had my law office before, and I'm in private practice now. One thing I can tell the younger people is, yes, go get your education, go get your experience, come back. People tell you to do that, but develop your own business. Figure out a business plan that where you don't have to rely on the Navajo Nation to give you work, because if you get educated and you come back, they're gonna butcher you in a council session, telling you you're not worth a hill of beans. They're going to be very disrespectful to you. My advice now is to, yes, get your education, develop some type of business that where you can come back to help the people. I currently have a very light caseload. I don't have a lot of cases. Before, when I was working with either with like prosecutor's office or other offices, there are times that I averaged over 100 cases at a time, trying to manage over 100 cases, and sometimes it was near impossible. But now that I'm in private practice, I have a good manageable caseload, and I help each individual Navajo, each person that comes into my office. I am helping them. I usually feel more rewarded by the end of the day, and that's within my own in my own office. So there always is, other things to do, and I think some of these attorney generals that were let go, there are some. In fact, I just was in court just a couple hours ago with Mr. Bradley, and he has his own successful practice down in the valley. So Navajo Nation government is not the only place to seek employment. You can make your own way out there. And I would
Hmm.
encourage everyone to do that. And lastly, I would say to the people, if you know you had a case, a legitimate complaint that was filed with ethics and rules, and if you have not gotten any responses, then make that noise. Make the noise to the current director, interim director, whomever they have there, all the way up through the speaker's office, and demand for a status, demand to know where those cases are, because that office was established for the people to be able to actually hold their government officials accountable.
Yeah, very nice. It's just one thought. You did say that there is a whistleblower protection, right?
Yes, there's an
Okay.
anti-retaliation that's written within the code itself. It's retaliation prohibited. Anyone that reports to through the ethics and rules office is automatically protected by that provision. But again, with the way things are, I doubt that that would even protect any individual, but there is, it's written in the law.
There's another alternative to filing a complaint, and that is going the private, hiring your own lawyer and suing. Is that possible?
That's very expensive. I will tell you that. One thing that I run into in private practice is a lot of people cannot afford legal counsel. They cannot afford legal counsel. And I think my rates are pretty decent compared to other attorneys on the Navajo Nation. Some charge high amounts of dollars, and if you have the money, yes, you could hire your own attorney, but it can get very expensive. There is the pro bono services as well too, but then that's all done a specific way. There's DNA Legal Services, New Mexico Legal Aid, but they're also limited by their by their budgets as well. So it's very hard to hire an attorney on your own. If you have the money to do it, it can be done. But then you
Yeah,
have a lot of good. I'm the president for the Bar Association, and we have a lot of non-Indians that come onto the reservation, and some of them want to help. Some of them are willing to do cases pro bono. Some want to help the Navajos. And those are people that I'm really grateful for. I think this last time around, we swore in 11 new attorneys. There was one attorney that was wanting to come onto the reservation. She was barred, or she came out from Manhattan, from New York, from Brooklyn, and she was wanting to do that. But she ran into some issues there, and but hopefully we will be able to get her sworn in. And she's so there are people out there. I also have taken on some cases to where I'm helping individuals out. I reduce what I ask for in my retainer or my legal fees, and there are people out there that want to help.
yeah. Well, in closing, if you wouldn't mind, maybe there could be one more or a possible couple more follow-ups on this issue, because I think we need to continue to talk
Sure.
about, and our efforts would be to really get this process going, because I mean it's just not working. People are just up in arms all over the Navajo Nation, and so I hope you're open to that. And thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. I have so many more questions, but you had requested an hour and a half, and you've given us an extra over 20 minutes.
I know. I was looking at the time as well, but
I
thank you for
appreciate
having
that.
me.
Yeah. So you're open to another follow up, other topics, because the whole effort is just to improve the system. That's what it is on behalf
Sure.
of the Navajo people. So,
And that's been the thing. I do truly believe in the Navajo Nation. I've always was very proud of where I came from. Everywhere I've practiced law, and earlier on I was talking about how I worked with numerous tribes, and I used to see civil rights violations by tribes against their own members. That used to really bother me. It used to bother me. And I used to tell people there, I'm glad I come from the Navajo Nation where we have a Bill of Rights, where we have our courts. And I always used to say that. But in this day and time, it's like, it to see where our government is right now, it's very hard to see, because I know our people can actually get to where they need to. Our people can make these things happen. We come from really strong leaders. Just like I said, my great grandfather, Chief Manuelito, he's one of the ones that brought us home from the prison camps. And he was not asking for a stipend. He was not asking for a P card. He didn't ask for per diem.
amen to that. Exactly. Cool, Sheila. Okay, thank you
Yep,
very much, and all you listeners. Our guest this evening, we're talking about ethics and rules, Office of the Navajo Nation. Our guest tonight is Mr. Rodriguez Morris. He's the former executive director of Ethics and Rules. So, and again, I mean, I'm sure that we've just only touched the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that we need to do, and I would encourage you to inbox me, and if there's any way that you want to contact Mr. Morris, it's up to you. If you want to give out your information as well, that they can inquire with you. I'm not sure how you would handle that, but that's an option for you as well. So, uh,
I'm actually listed on the bar attorney listing. So my email, my phone number, everything is there. So if they
uh,
need to get a hold of me for any legal services or anything like that, I'll be happy to speak with whomever.
okay. All right. Yeah, Lana Kona. So we'll be in touch again. And thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
joining us this evening. And yeah, La, how going at?
Yes, sir. Go on it.